All right, let's jump right in. We're going to be breaking down the absolute fundamentals of internal auditing. Seriously, think of this as the essential groundwork, the foundation you really need to understand how companies today keep themselves healthy and on track.
So here's a question for you. How does a big company check its own health? I mean, you and we can go to a doctor for a checkup, right? But how does a giant organization look itself in the mirror and make sure everything's running the way it's supposed to? Well, that, in a nutshell, is exactly where internal auditing steps in. Okay, so let's get the official by-the-book definition out there. Internal auditing is defined as an independent, objective assurance and advisory service designed to add value and improve an organization's operations. It's all about helping a company hit its goals by making sure its internal systems for things like governance and risk management are actually working. But let's, translate that into plain English. What this really gets at is a huge shift in thinking. The old stereotype of an auditor is someone just trying to play gotcha, right? Looking for mistakes. But that's not the real point anymore. The true purpose is to be proactive. It's about making the whole organization stronger, smarter, and more efficient. It's all about improvement. So when we say it adds value, what does that even mean? Well, it's not just some fuzzy corporate buzzword. It breaks down into real, tangible benefits. You get assurance that things are working, which improves how the company is run. And you can see the ripple effect, right? Better controls lead to smarter decisions. And when you're making smarter decisions, your reputation and credibility just naturally get a boost. Now, for auditors to do all this important work, they can't just wander around the office and start poking into things. Nope, they need official authority. And that brings us to their official rulebook, the Internal Audit Charter. I mean, think about it for a second. These auditors need to look at sensitive files, they need to talk to anyone in the company, they might even need access to warehouses or other property. You just can't do that informally. That authority has to be spelled out, official, and backed up at the very top of the organization. And this document, the Internal Audit Charter, is the key to all of it. It's basically the constitution for the Internal Audit Department. It spells out their purpose, their power, and their responsibilities. And here's the crucial part. It's not some memo from a manager. It is formally signed off on by the board of directors. That's where it gets its teeth. And getting that charter right is absolutely a team sport. The board, they're the ones at the very top, so they're the ones who approve it and give internal audit its official mandate. Then you have senior management. Their job is to actively support the charter, to make sure everyone in the company cooperates, and to give the auditors the backing they need to get the job done. Okay, so the auditors have their authority. But what makes their reports and findings worth anything? What makes them trustworthy? Well, that comes down to two absolute pillars of the profession: independence and objectivity. These are the principles that, guard the guardians. Now, people often use these words interchangeably, but they're actually a little different. Independence is all about the organization. Where does the audit team fit on the company org chart? Are they free from meddling? Do they report high enough up, like to the board? Objectivity, on the other hand, is personal. It's about the individual auditor's mindset. Are they coming into the job with an unbiased attitude? You absolutely need both. This all sounds fantastic in a textbook, doesn't it? But we all know the real world is messy. So what can actually go wrong? What are the real threats that can completely undermine an auditor's work? Well, here are some classic examples of what we call impairments. It could be really obvious, like a manager pressuring an auditor to water down a negative finding. Or it could be more subtle, like suddenly not being able to get access to the right people or files. Even something like a major budget cut can be a problem if it stops the audit team from doing what they're supposed to do. The big takeaway is that these threats are real, and they have to be watched for constantly. All right, now that we've got a handle on the auditor's authority and their core principles, let's zoom out and look at the big picture. We've talked about auditors, we've talked about management, and we've talked about the board. How do all these groups work together to manage risk? Well, the answer is a really simple but powerful idea called the 3 lines model. And this really is the central challenge, isn't it? You've got people running the business every day, you've got other people overseeing risk, and then you have a group providing independent checks. How do you make sure they're all pulling in the same direction and not leaving any dangerous gaps? This is the solution. The 3 lines model is all about clarifying who does what. It's not about building walls between departments, it's the exact opposite. It's about making communication smoother by making sure everyone knows their specific role in managing the company's risks. So how does it work? Simple.
The first line is management, the people on the front lines doing the work. They own their risks. The second line includes functions like risk and compliance. They're there to support and monitor the first line. And then finally, you have the third line, internal audit, providing that independent, objective checkup on the whole system.
If you need a super simple way to remember all that, this quote nails it. The first line does the work, the second line checks the work, and the third line audits the whole thing to make sure it's actually effective. Easy, right? Okay, with all this responsibility, there is one last foundational idea we have to touch on. It's called due professional care. Basically, it means auditors have to be skillful and careful when they do their job. But, and this is a really interesting part, they are not expected to be perfect. They provide reasonable assurance, not absolute ironclad guarantees. And that's a super important distinction.
Whew. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground here, from charters and independence to the three lines model. So after all that, what's the one key takeaway? What's the single most important thing to remember from this whole explainer?
It really all comes back to this. At its heart, internal auditing is the organization's independent health check. It isn't just a department that ticks boxes. It's a strategic partner that helps build a stronger, smarter, and more resilient company from the inside out, making sure it's healthy enough to succeed, both today and way into the future.